Hi, I'm Holly. I have Saturn in my ninth house, and this is my story. So, I'll tell you a little bit about my father. He is someone who is a very strict Buddhist. It was the way that he grew up. His family was religious and they were very strict Buddhists, so he was as well. He really sort of removed himself from doing the 5 sins in Buddhism, and those sins were lying, gambling, infidelity, killing other beings, and consumption of alcohol and other addictive substances. So these were the 5 Buddhist sins. So my dad works as a professor in a university, and he teaches, Buddhist studies. And a lot of the times he would be in his studies. When he's not teaching, when he's at home, he has his own study, and that's where he spends most of his time. And on the weekends, every weekend we would go to the temple and we would give some offerings to the monk, and that's usually how it went. I mean, I was okay with that. I felt like, Buddhism was sort of the way that I grew up, and I never really kind of questioned it. But I was also feeling like I couldn't really fit in because, other people, other families are not as strict as ours, and I wanted to go out with my friends. Sometimes I go out with my friends and we, party a little bit, and, there would be alcohol and things, and I would also drink. And I would come home, a little bit tipsy and things, and I know that a lot of parents don't like it when their kids do that, and I totally understand it when, they ground their kids and they tell them to go to their room and, and don't do this again. But there was one time when, I came home a little bit tipsy, and this does not happen often. But once I came home a little bit tipsy, and my dad sort of, instead of doing what typical parents would do, he sort of condemned me or cursed me. He said that I should be ashamed of my sinful behavior, and I couldn't really understand a lot of things. For example, I would ask him one day, I remember at dinner table, one day I was asking him, Dad, why I thought that one of the 5 Buddhist sins was to kill animals, but why do you eat chicken soup? That's what we were having that day, chicken soup. Isn't the chicken dead? Isn't this, and then I know you didn't kill it, Dad, but isn't this secondhand killing? That's what I said to him. But I guess maybe I shouldn't have done it at the dinner table, but, he didn't, his justifications were, that, it was the cycle of life. But I don't know, I felt strange somehow about, I could understand if you were a Buddhist and you wanted to have chicken soup, but if you were as strict as my dad with a lot of other things, like not drinking alcohol and not gambling, you know what I mean? I don't know. So I just felt a lot of guilt, guilt regarding the fact that I was going against, the sin, I was doing sinful behaviors, going against what my father, the family believed in, but also guilt questioning being curious about these bigger questions. It's just guilt, guilt, guilt. Sometimes he would teach me meditation, and I'm really thankful for that, because I think meditation is a really, really good technique to help to clear your mind and monitor your thoughts. I don't know, I think I just most of the time questioned whether my dad was living what he preached. So when I was a little bit older and when I was in high school, there was this one class that we all had to take, and it was religious studies. So I remember that like the teacher would teach different religions, and I sort of felt that all the religions were contradicting with each other. For example, like in Islam you couldn't eat pork, but very strict Buddhists wouldn't eat beef but eat pork, and in Islam you would eat beef and not eat pork. This is just one example, but it made me question the fundamentals of these thinkings, these philosophies, these religions, these moral, ethical conduct as to what is right and what is wrong. And of course I thought, my dad being somebody who really studied religion, that I should be able to ask him these questions. But when I did, it was just sort of like, Buddhism is the best and it's the way to go, and the conduct that is stated within Buddhist scriptures and what people who worshipped Buddhism did, that was the correct way to go, and there was no other questions necessary. Like, that's what he would say. So I don't know. When I was 18, I had this friend, and she was an atheist, so she didn't really believe in anything, and I thought that I clicked a lot with her and I connected a lot with her, and I felt that I wanted to try to be an atheist as well. Of course, I didn't tell my dad this, but we were together, the two of us, secretly made a vow that we would not believe in any of these things, these religions at all. When I went on to university, I first studied management, but I couldn't really continue with that degree, so I sort of changed my major, and then I went to study communication arts for about a year, and I couldn't really finish that either, so I changed my major again, and I went to study food science, but I also couldn't finish that degree, so at the end I had no degree. I left university, I had tried to study a bunch of different things, and I came out with no degree. When I was 22, after graduation, after university, I had a job as a waitress, because that's really what I felt I could do at that point. I sort of also felt guilty that I couldn't finish my degree, so I felt like I didn't deserve anything better, so I just became a typical waitress, and that was fine. But I sort of fell into a depression from time to time throughout my 20s, because I would be doing okay some months, and other months I would wake up and not want to go to work because I didn't know what was the point of it. And it really reached a peak when I was 27. That's when I really started to question, like, why am I here? Sort of had an existential crisis, we could say. I couldn't understand the point of my life. I couldn't understand the meaning of anything in my life. What was the point of working at this job? What was the point of having to go to university? I didn't have a degree even. What was the point of having to study everything in school? What was the point? I had some money saved up at that point, so I decided that, I don't know, I was very restless and something inside me was telling me to move. So I left my job, I sold my apartment, and I sold a lot of things that I had with me. I said goodbye to my mom and my dad, and I moved to New Zealand. I honestly had no idea what I was doing. I felt that something deep inside of me was telling me that maybe I could find some meaning in my life if I were to go there. So I went there and I was, helping out on farms, and just not really, and made some money, but mostly it was that I had free accommodations and I would just wake up, help out on organic farms, with crops, vegetables in the gardens and people's gardens and things like that. And while I was there, for about a year, my depression got a little bit better because I sort of had new experiences come into my life and had a chance to think and ponder a little bit. But I was still feeling the questions hadn't been answered yet. But when I was 28, there were these group of people coming from Japan. They were a sort of cultural exchange program, and they came to New Zealand. So I talked to them a little bit, I decided to join them. So, once I did that, I was traveling back and forth from Japan and New Zealand doing cultural exchanges. And it was good. When I would do cultural exchange in Japan, I would study Japanese, and that was really fun. I would also spend some time in the temples. It's more of like a temple for people who practice Zen. I had gotten acquainted with one of the Zen teachers there, so that's why I spent a lot of time there studying about this, belief and what it was all about, and practicing Zen meditation and things like that. When I was 30, my father got really sick, and my mom asked me to go back home to be with him. So before I went back home to see my dad, I went back to the temple, the one that I'd always gone to study. And I remembered I prayed. I prayed for my dad to get better. I was praying for something bigger out there. And it didn't matter if the prayers were being sent to, it didn't matter who the prayers were being sent to, whether that's going to be the spirits, in nature, in the trees, whether that's going to be the spirit of the Buddha, whether that's going to be the spirit of Jesus Christ. Whoever was out there, I was praying for them to help my dad. When you reach that point where you feel like someone close to you, or even you yourself, are so close to death, you just feel like the thing that you cling to, even if that means a mindset or a perspective that you cling to, if you could open up that perspective, and if opening up that perspective and embracing other beliefs, other faith out there, anything that could help save your loved one, that would be the thing to do. And because of this, I understood very deeply in my heart that no matter what religion you belong to, what beliefs you have, at the end of the day, all religion is based on love. Love is the fundamental principle behind all belief systems. And I knew this while I was praying for my dad. And so, when I went to see him and spent some time with him, he got better. He started to get better, little by little. And I don't know if it's because of my prayers, or if it's, because he just got happier to see me. Whatever it was, I'm so thankful. And, so I'm just so thankful for that. I'm now 31 years old, and I've decided to go back to university. I'm pursuing a degree in theology, and I'm hoping to be able to teach this in the near future. I've now chosen a certain, shall we say, belief system to live my life by, and the one that I've chosen, I've really learned this throughout my life experiences. And the strongest sort of principle is the yin-yang principle. That's the one that I sort of adhere to while I'm living my life. It's this idea that everything in the universe has a complementary opposite to balance it out. That things that we may think are completely opposite will put us into the extremes. But that's only in our mind. If we can think of things that are seemingly opposite to us as being complementary to us, that is balance, that is harmony. So that's the truth that I've come across, and that is what I live my life based on. There's no need for me to seek anymore, and there's no need for me to even impose this on other people, because I truly believe it within my own heart, through my own experience. Having, to experience being an atheist and having to experience very strict religious family background, but these two things are the yin and yang to one another, and if you can put them together, they complement each other, because without the very strict strict religious principles and the very atheist way of approaching the world, there would be no in between. There would be nothing that could exist in between these two things, which is the understanding of the golden thread that underlies all religions. And the journey that I had to take to find out my own truth is one that I hold very dear to my heart. So having gone through all of this, I realize now what my karmic cycle has been. It all started because of my insecurity about my ability to cultivate faith and seek for truth, because of the way that the faith, was always imposed upon me. It's the teachings were always imposed upon me, and there's really nothing wrong with the teachings. It was just the way that it was being forced upon me that made me not believe in it. So I was coping for this by, one, not believing in anything at all, and, two, studying about all the religions and the philosophies, and yet I'm unable to cultivate any inner beliefs in any of them. So this leads to a rejection or an avoidance of higher education, or, travels abroad. Because it's kind of like what's the point? That's when you reach an existential crisis as a result of the struggle between, and that's when you reach an existential crisis, questioning, then what is the point of all of this? You know, this, because of this empty, anxious feeling of not having anything to believe in and not knowing why you should live anymore, it made me desperate to blindly join any group of believers, even if it doesn't really resonate with me. But, you know, if some choices were not, if I were not selective enough, then I could be fooled by dogmatic teachings of a certain group, which, you know, would have caused me to leave that certain group as a result of the struggle between the inner values and the outer opinions of the group. And then, because I had put so much blind faith into this group that I thought, you know, could maybe help me to find the right belief system, but then they turned out that they didn't, this causes even more insecurity about my ability to cultivate faith and seek for the truth. So I've learned that in order to escape this cycle, I had to be my own teacher, my own guru, and my own authority. So how do I do this? Well, first of all, like I mentioned, it's the understanding that there's nothing wrong with any philosophical system or any religion or belief. It's just the way that it's imposed or forced upon me. And then after understanding that, I had to open myself up to direct life experiences like travels, higher education, joining certain communities, living abroad, you know, studying different languages, experiencing different cultures, because all of this puts me on the path to being my own guru and teacher. And through direct experiences with life, after forming, you know, I could form my own belief systems, and after that, what I had to do was weigh this belief system that I had with the one that was imposed on me earlier, and try to see if I can extract what these two things have in common. What's the underlying principle that the both of them have in common? What is the golden thread that links them together? So it's almost like I'm walking on a tightrope. And on one side is this struggle against dogmatic people, dogmatic teachings, and people of authority. On the other side is this sense of purposelessness, of not knowing what's the point of life. I'm walking this tightrope between these two things. If I keep walking the tightrope, which is actually the tightrope of my own truth, if I could keep going, at the end of it, I discover that what I really find is joy and freedom. Freedom is walking my own truth without jumping into one end or the other. That is freedom.